Good morning, gardeners, and welcome to Tuesday, July 11th. My name is Catherine, and I created a show called Good Morning Gardeners, even though I can't grow green things because I am referring to gardening metaphorically. We're planting the seeds for a better day. We're starting our morning by getting in the right mindset to cultivate a better life for ourselves, better communities, and a better world. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to add Good Morning Gardeners to your morning routine. I do my best to wake you up with positive and mentally stimulating ideas, but sometimes I do miss things. If you have something to add to the ideas I discussed today, please chime in the comments section below. Today's daily Stoic reading, titled The Startup of You, begins with a quote from Epictetus. But what does Socrates say? Just as one person delights in improving his farm, just another his horse, so I delight in attending to my own improvement day by day. The authors add, the rage these days is to start your own company, to be an entrepreneur. There is no question, building a business from scratch can be an immensely rewarding pursuit. It's why people put their whole lives into doing it, working countless hours and taking countless risks. But shouldn't we be just as invested in building ourselves as we would be to any company? Like a startup, we begin as just an idea. We're incubated, put out into the world where we develop slowly, and then, over time, we accumulate partners, employees, customers, investors, and wealth. Is it really so strange to treat your own life as seriously as you might treat an idea for a business? Which one really is the matter of life and death? So I love this one because, as I'm sure you can imagine, I take personal development very seriously. In fact, this daily Stoic reading today reminds me of a system that I developed for my personal planning system or my personal planner that I call the ring system. And the idea is that there are three rings, and all activities and projects and efforts that you focus on can be categorized into one of these three rings. And they are organized concentrically. So the innermost ring is yourself, um, what we spoke about today in the Daily Stoic reading. And then the second ring out from that is friends and family, local community. And the third is your efforts that might go global, your legacy or your career. Yeah, things like that, thinking on a bigger scale. So I I tend to try to organize all of the activities and efforts in my life into these three rings. And the idea is that the energy should flow from the center outwards. So the very first priority for every day is the innermost ring. And then I guess the energy can, or the efforts can bloom outward. Um, and that is how the activities are meant to be prioritized. And, I developed this and I'm uh, very into planning and organizing my efforts and activities because I have a lot going on. And I so often feel that my life is like juggling balls. And, I can juggle three balls, but then after I add a fourth one, it gets a little iffy. And then adding in a fifth one, and I drop another one. So, like, say I can get really religious about my daily meditation, well, then for some reason I stop taking my daily walk or something like that. And I'm sure everyone can relate. Of course, both of those activities were both ring one, but the idea is still the same because the way that I see it is that uh, organizing your life, building your life, and cultivating a better life is less like just being able to juggle more balls and more like building a pyramid. Because when your innermost ring, I'm mixing metaphors now, I'm sorry, but if your innermost ring or like is like the base of your pyramid, so if that is solid, then it's going to be a lot easier to add on additional things. It's just like the old saying of like, you can't take care of anyone else until you take care of yourself. I believe that that's just true. And just common wisdom or common sense at this point. And yeah, so that's why I really love that daily reading. And as I said, I am very committed to personal development. And, this actually reminded me that creating Good Morning Gardeners is also an act of personal development for me. I mean, obviously, I want to bring value to you guys. I want to possibly, inspire a better world by delivering this value to you guys. But also, when I started this show, it was partly because I knew that I was too inhibited and I wanted to become more comfortable with speaking out and being perceived. Uh, so, by the way, this morning I will be swapping these segments around and beginning with our feel good moment. But before I get into the feel good moment, I wanted to open up with you guys and share that I have been struggling lately. For the past couple of weeks, my energy has seemed to be depleting more and more with each passing day. The end of last week was particularly difficult for me, and I'm not sure if you guys could tell, but I totally phoned in the last two Good Morning Gardeners episodes. Now, I've been hesitant to discuss this feeling that I have because I can't really explain it. The best way I can describe it this morning is that it's like being burned out. But I'm hesitant to say that as well because I don't really have any legitimate reason to be burned out. My schedule lately hasn't been particularly taxing, and I mean, it's summer. The days are long, the weather is warm, and the vibe is chill. Nevertheless, after I uploaded the previous episode, which you guys should have watched on Monday, but I accidentally scheduled for Sunday, but I filmed it on Friday. And after I uploaded that and completed the tasks I absolutely had to do, I went to bed in the middle of the day at like 2 p.m. I scrolled through TikTok on my phone a lot in bed. I tried to read a book, but I couldn't even focus on the book. And eventually I fell asleep. This is very unusual for me. I try to be very careful about the amount of time that I waste on social media, and I can almost always focus on reading a book instead. Now, I didn't sleep long, but I didn't wake up feeling refreshed. That burned out feeling continued throughout the rest of Friday and the next day, Saturday as well. Now, if you are maybe thinking that I am telling you this story because I'm going to share that I discovered why I was feeling burned out, or that I had some epiphany about taking plenty of rest or not being too hard on yourself, I'm not. I'm only sharing this because it explains why I spent so much time on TikTok this weekend. And as a result, I encountered a really powerful video that I want to share with you this morning. Now, I also have another reason for sharing this stuff about being burned out and being perceived, but hopefully it will make a lot more sense after you watch the video.
Hi, this is a message for the person who's uncomfortable being seen. If that's not you, scroll past. Hello, hi to the person. I see you, and so do your ancestors. And this next chapter of your life that you've been praying for, that you've been asking for at the altar space, it's only going to come when you're comfortable with perception, when you're comfortable with being perceived as you are. There are so many people are trying to give you blessings, but they're unable to locate you because you're hiding. You're hiding the best parts of yourself. You need to remember that authenticity is where your energy source resides in. It's where your ashe, your ability to make things happen, is created from. There are so many people who are looking to only give you what they have. Remember that.
So this video was posted by a user called Ehime Ora, and I'm sure I am butchering her name, but I wanted to give her full credit for her insightful ideas. I noticed that she'd linked a website in her TikTok bio, and when I clicked on it, I saw that she is an author and has recently published a book called Ancestors Said 365 Meditations for a Peaceful Year. So given how much I enjoyed this video and how I have also been on the hunt for this kind of daily wisdom book lately, I immediately pre-ordered Ancestors Said. If you'd like to order the book or read more about Ehime Ora, I have linked her website and the book in the description of this video. But to address the content of the video, believe it or not, I am the person who is uncomfortable with being perceived. My primary intention for creating Good Morning Gardeners was to provide value to all of you and to share some amazing ideas that might inspire healing and therefore positive change in the world. But I also did it in order to become more comfortable with being seen and heard. I have definitely been the person who hides myself for as long as I can remember. Ehime Ora said that authenticity is where your energy resides. It is where your ability to make things happen is created from. And I truly believe that. I believe that the people who programmed me with inhibiting beliefs and stifling habits did so in order to control and repress me. And that whether consciously or not, they did this from a place of fear. To illustrate the programming to which I am referring, I am going to read from a book that I haven't opened in a while, the book which put me in the frame of mind to start creating Good Morning Gardeners, and that is Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. So Maxwell Maltz writes, self-expression may become morally wrong as far as your conscience is concerned if you were squelched, shut up, shamed, humiliated, or perhaps punished as a child for speaking up, expressing your ideas, or showing off. Such a child learns that it is wrong to express himself, to hold himself out as having any worthwhile ideas, or perhaps to speak at all. If a child is punished for showing anger, or shamed too much for showing fear, or perhaps made fun of for showing love, he learns that expressing his real feelings is wrong. Some children learn that it is sinful or wrong only to express the bad emotions, anger and fear. But when you inhibit bad emotions, you also inhibit the expression of good emotions. And the yardstick for judging emotions is not goodness or badness as such, but appropriateness and inappropriateness. It is appropriate for the man who meets with the bear on the trail to experience fear. It is appropriate to experience anger if there is a legitimate need to destroy an obstacle by sheer force and destructiveness. Properly directed and controlled, anger is an important element of courage. If every time a child comes up with an opinion he is squelched and put in his place, he learns that it is right for him to be a nobody and wrong to want to be a somebody. Such a distorted and unrealistic conscience does indeed make cowards of us all. We can become overly sensitive and become too carefully concerned with whether we have a right to succeed in even a worthwhile endeavor. We become too carefully concerned about whether or not I deserve this. Many people, inhibited by the wrong kind of conscience, hold back or take a back seat in any kind of endeavor. They secretly feel it would not be right for them to hold themselves out as a leader or presume to be somebody, or they are overly concerned with whether other people might think they were showing off. So that passage really resonates with me. It's almost like Maxwell Maltz peered directly into my childhood as a source for his book. But Maxwell Maltz wrote this book before I was even born. So this leads me to believe that this is probably a pretty common experience for people. If you can relate, I would love to share with you some of Maxwell Maltz's tips for becoming disinhibited in our learning moment today. If you are among the millions who suffer unhappiness and failure because of inhibition, you need to deliberately practice disinhibition. You need to practice being less careful, less concerned, less conscientious. You need to practice speaking before you think instead of thinking before you speak, acting without thinking instead of thinking or considering carefully before you act. So to do this, Maxwell Maltz offers a list of what he calls practice exercises, and there are 5 of them. So practice exercise number 1. Don't wonder in advance what you are going to say. Just open your mouth and say it. Improvise as you go along. Practice exercise 2. Don't plan. Don't think before you act. Act and correct your actions as you go along. This advice may seem radical, yet it is actually the way all servo mechanisms must work. A torpedo does not think out all its errors in advance and attempt to correct them in advance. It must act first, start moving toward the goal, then correct any errors which may occur. We cannot think first and act afterward, said A.N. Whitehead. From the moment of birth, we are immersed in action and can only fitfully guide it by taking thought. Exercise number 3, stop criticizing yourself. The inhibited person indulges in self-critical analysis continually. After each action, however simple, he says to himself, I wonder if I should have done that. After he has gotten up courage enough to say something, he immediately says to himself, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Maybe the other person will take it the wrong way. Stop all this tearing yourself apart. Useful and beneficial feedback works subconsciously, spontaneously, and automatically. Conscious self-criticism, self-analysis, and introspection is good and useful if undertaken perhaps once a year. But as a continual moment-to-moment, day-by-day sort of second-guessing yourself or playing Monday morning quarterback to your past actions, it is defeating. Watch for this self-criticism. Pull yourself up short and stop it. Exercise number 4. Make a habit of speaking louder than usual. Inhibited people are notoriously soft-spoken. Raise the volume of your voice. You don't have to shout at people and use an angry tone. Just consciously practice speaking louder than usual. Loud talk in itself is a powerful disinhibitor. Recent experiments have shown that you can exert up to 15% more strength and lift more weight if you will shout, grunt, or groan loudly as you make the lift. The explanation of all this is that loud shouting disinhibits and allows you to exert all your strength, including that which has been blocked off and tied up by inhibition. Exercise number 5. Let people know when you like them. The inhibited personality is afraid of expressing good feelings as well as bad ones. If he expresses love, he is afraid it will be judged as sentimentality. If he expresses friendship, he is afraid it will be considered fawning or apple polishing. If he compliments someone, he is afraid the other person will think him superficial or suspect an ulterior motive. Totally ignore all these negative feedback signals. Compliment at least 3 people every day. If you like what someone is doing or wearing or saying, let him know it. Be direct. So obviously, I would encourage you to consider this advice and take one actionable step this morning that you can practice to become less inhibited. But for our focus moment, I want to remind you what Maxwell Maltz wrote about the appropriateness and inappropriateness of emotions. He wrote that it is appropriate to experience anger if there is a legitimate need to destroy an obstacle by sheer force and destructiveness. Properly directed and controlled, anger is an important element of courage. So some of us were taught that anger is a bad emotion. So we are in the habit of repressing our anger or even directing it inward at ourselves. Anger is a powerful emotion, so it can be very destructive. And because of this, it is important to do your best to avoid damaging yourself with this emotion. But I love the idea that anger can be used to destroy the obstacles in my way. For most of my life, I have been in the habit of directing my anger inward at myself. Anytime something went wrong in my life, I immediately blamed myself and punished myself for not being better. This bad habit fueled my perfectionism. It paralyzed me, rendered me speechless in social situations, in classrooms, and at work. It fueled my inhibition, made me dislike being perceived more and more, so I withdrew myself from the world more and more. I used the excuse of being an introvert to explain this behavior, but withdrawing from the world only made me more afraid of being perceived, which fueled my anxiety, which fueled my self-criticism. And I'm sure you can imagine how all of this became a downward spiraling feedback loop, which drew me further and further down into a very dark place. The worst thing about this dark place wasn't how unpleasant it was. the worst thing about it was how helpless it made me. I didn't just feel helpless, I was helpless. Because as Ehime Ora says, the ability to make things happen comes from a place of being comfortable with your authentic self being perceived. So, if this is true, then being absolutely terrified of your authentic self being perceived renders you completely ineffective. So, if you, like me, were programmed to repress your emotions and ideas, if you were told to be seen and not heard, if you were trained to be quiet, inhibited, or even invisible, it might be time for you to get angry. Because all of this inhibition doesn't just disappear because we want it to. This is the 49th episode of Good Morning Gardeners, and I am still uncomfortable with being perceived. While I do have hope that if I continue creating this show for long enough, that discomfort will fade, I also think that getting angry about my inhibition can help to break it down. And I think it's appropriate for us to be angry that so many of us have been quieted, repressed, and hidden away by people who did not have any right to hold us back. So this morning, I prompt you to get angry. Get angry in a destructive way, but not in a way that destroys yourself. Get angry at the obstacles in your way. Get angry enough, and that anger might even be able to destroy what is holding you back. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I will speak with you again tomorrow.